take the escalator.
Let's wait for these last few people to come in and see if they close. Will they close? I have
The door doesn't stay shut. So.
Oh, the door doesn't stay shut. Well, then let's continue. We're good to go. Okay, so I'm Robert Small. I'll be moderating this panel. If you all don't care, I'm only here because I know RPGs. But let's go through our panelists. We'll start down here with James and work our way down.
Yeah, I'm James Hunter. I've written a bunch of books, Running In Online, Rogue Dungeon, Bibliomancer, my buddy Dakota down there. All kinds of stuff. I also run Shadow Alley Press, which is one of the publishing houses that sort of specializes in game lit and lit RPG. And, I'm just happy to be here, man. I'm with my buddies talking about books. This is the best thing. Michael Chatfield.
Well, so I'm Michael Chatfield. I'll let you get that one. I write science fiction, fantasy, lit RPG. I've got the Emerald series and the Ten Realms series, which I was reminded is like two of the longest and completed series right now, which is very weird. Someone please take that title from me. Anyway, moving on, we've got Ryan DeBruyn over here. Awesome dude, awesome fellow Canadian. So.
There you go. Yeah, so I'm Ryan DeBruyn. I write lit RPG exclusively at the moment, game lit RPG fantasy. I've got 2 worlds with 3 series spread out between them. Really enjoy it. I'm really excited to be here because it's a lot of fun and it's really great to actually have lit RPG panels this year, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I've got my buddy Harmon Cooper here.
Hey everybody, I'm Harmon Cooper. I've written 7 lit RPG series, and I've been writing since 2015. Last year, my YA lit RPG book won the Audiobook of the Year award, narrated by Travis Baldry, who you all know. And right now, I'm writing in the Cowboy Necromancer world, which is a post-apocalyptic southwestern setting, and also Tokens and Towers. And next to me is Dakota Krout.
Hey guys, I'm Dakota Krout. I am an author for lit RPG cultivation and game titles. My publishing house, Mondale Press, also focuses on those same genres. We try to make sure that we have a lot of very good experience that we're trying to put out in those genres. Can you guys hear me okay?
A little louder.
A little louder? Okay. Sorry, Green Knight lost last night, and it was a
Green Knight. Sorry.
but it wasn't from lack of cheering. So, yeah, so it's really exciting to be here. If you couldn't hear me before, I'm Dakota Krout. I write in lit RPG, game lit, and cultivation, and my publishing house, which is Mondale Press, also focuses on those genres, and I'm very excited to be here.
Okay. I love it when panelists introduce the one next to them. So I'll start with a religious question. For inspiration, do you use TTRPGs or electronic RPGs? We'll start with Dakota and work our way back to me.
So, for inspiration, I guess I was really big into D&D, so that was what I did for the longest time. I was the dungeon master. I was running people through, finding new and creative ways to kill them, and eventually I just started writing that down. And that's as the big bad guy, which is the dungeon master, I'm kind of the dungeon, and that's how my first book came out. It was from the perspective of the dungeon as it was trying to kill the adventurers that were coming through it. So yeah, that was the start. Just awesome stuff since then.
I draw inspiration from both, and so weirdly enough, I draw inspiration from tabletop like podcasts. I find those really interesting. The Adventure Zone was one that I really liked that when I was first starting writing in this genre that I was listening to. Anime, I drew inspiration from when I started with my feedback loop in 2015. And electronic stuff, well, of course, JRPGs are my heart and soul, so I kind of a blend of all 3 of those.
So perfect. I started actually because I was addicted to World of Warcraft, like probably a lot of us were at one point in our life. I think I had something like 5 years of playtime on that game. And I took that as my biggest inspiration when I started. And then from there, I just tried to morph into things that I'm getting into now, like Final Fantasy, Dungeons & Dragons. I've been in Dungeons & Dragons just as long as World of Warcraft, but it never went backwards for me, so I don't have a number. But yeah, those were my biggest ones for sure.
When I started writing, I was just doing straight science fiction. I was really interested in fantasy, but then it was only when I realized, oh, these video games I've been playing tons of hours on, and people were like, you're wasting your time. And I was like, it's useful, I swear. And then I
Show
found
some
and then I was like, oh, this is gonna be so much fun. Like for me, Skyrim and Oblivion were huge for just so replayable. There's so many mods out there. It's really awesome to get into. I did do a lot of D&D, but it's always like, you go through like a couple of months and then the group falls apart and then it reforms and then you're just like, come on, let's just have a season, please. And so I guess for me, writing books was me able to have a season. But I go a lot of just straight off video games. I just go straight into single player like The Witcher and that kind of stuff. But then also, I'm a huge FPS player, so I love like the group combat and that kind of stuff. So really anything that I can shoot or magic or stab, anything like that, and it's a video game and it's legal, it's all good.
Yeah. I've drawn inspiration from a lot of different things. I definitely lean more toward video games, but I have a lot of different series, and the game system. And I think that when we're talking about lit RPG, like the game system is its own character, and really the setting determines for me what kind of inspiration I draw from. A lot of the isekai transported to another world really lends itself better to a tabletop style format. I've also done like stuck in a game style series, and so obviously I draw lots of inspiration from games that I play, like Diablo or Elder Scrolls or WoW. So I really think that it depends for me on the story that I'm trying to tell and which set of mechanics is going to help tell the most interesting story in the most interesting way for the world that I'm trying to build out. So it's kind of a both end approach for me.
It's all about being as badass as possible.
Well, I mean, that's a given, obviously.
And that actually is a great segue into the next question, which is why use the discrete level system, aka leveling like in D&D, when there's so many other options?
Where do you want to start?
We'll start with you and go back down.
All right.
We'll just switch it up like that.
I think the discrete leveling system is important for a lot of reasons, and I think the emergence of lit RPG as sort of the powerhouse that it is because of the obvious leveling. Even in the progression fantasy sphere, where it's not quite like level 1, level 2, level 3, the idea that characters gain actual trackable progression is really important and satisfying to us as readers. There's nothing more satisfying as a game player than to get that ding, to complete that quest and get that new power up. And I also think that there's a bit of reader psychology into it. I think that a lot of game lit and cultivation readers maybe feel like they don't have agency in their own lives, and so the idea that you can do the work and still not get the reward. That happens in real life. That doesn't happen in game lit. That doesn't happen in cultivation. If you do the work, you get the reward. And I think that there's something inherently just about that is so satisfying psychologically to readers. And I think that's a big part of why it's taken off in the way it has.
Yeah, kind of building upon that, I think a lot of people are quietly awesome, and there's a lot of like hidden stats everyone has, and then like it's like, well, it's not shown on a sheet. You can't show I'm amazing at fucking baking, but no one sees me fucking baking in my house. I'm not exactly doing it in the street, right?
You can on TikTok.
Yeah, we kind of thought, though, here's my big shop. I'm wheeling it around. But anyway, business idea for someone. But it is the kind of thing of like you get to show this is the behind the scenes. This is this person's life turned into stats and shows they're actually progressing. They're really getting ahead, because sometimes, in life it can feel like you're on a treadmill and you're just still going. Yeah. Here it's, you've made it to the other side. You're not travel logging anymore. You're beating the crap out of stuff and you're getting points for it. It also makes like blowing up all kinds of creatures or like smartly working your way through everything. Like an obstacle, you look at it and you can go, yeah, I can go and murder the hell out of it, but I can also like outsmart it, and that's so much more rewarding because I get all these rewards with like more effort, but in a different way, which I love that good stuff.
So for me, it was the discrete leveling system, specifically because I came from a professional sports background, and my whole life I was banging my head against the glass ceiling trying to break through, get stronger, do all these things. And if there was ever a thing that I wanted, it was to be given micro, increases in something so I could track those sort of things. And, that doesn't exist in the real world. And it was so amazing to read the first of RPGs, play video games, and have that exist. So just to be able to say, okay, I make it through something, and I've gotten this huge increase in my volleyball statistics or strength, or I'm lifting and I'm up every morning at 6 a.m. to 9 lifting weights. you don't see any results, possibly because the other person's doing the same thing. So it'd be nice to be able to track it. So that's why I love this speed highlights.
To build off of them, and especially James, it's a dopamine response that, like, it's the reason why video games are so fun, and that's the reason why we play them. And like my poor wife, she doesn't play video games, and she sees me playing, and I become like a different person. I'm like, oh my god, fucking beat, so I gotta go right too. But well, I gotta do this first, you know. And it's a dopamine response, and so what we are doing is using a leveling system as the reader's responding to that in the same way that you would as if you were playing a video game. So to build off of both of what everyone's saying, it's a dopamine response, and it's a physiological response, I think.
I don't have a big boom voice like you, so I got to words a little closer. So, a little love. Yeah. So for me, it is. I mean, we've heard them talk about like why they personally do it, like what they do and how they do that. For me, it's all kind of based on Sanderson's first law of magic, right? So the ability of the reader to understand what's going on in the book is directly proportional to how well they understand the system, right? So if the people reading the book don't understand why it's happening, it can really take away a lot of enjoyment of the book, especially since I would say that our genre especially has a lot of very technical people, like really intelligent people that like to see step by step how things are happening. And so if you have your, old fantasy style trope where this farmer kid picks up a sword and goes and kills the king's guard immediately, and it's because he's the son of the emperor from 1,000 years ago or whatever, it takes away a lot of the enjoyment because it's so overdone. And so for me, it's all about making sure that my audience can understand what's happening.
Yeah, one of the things I love about working with Dakota, because he and I did the Bibliomancer series together, he is the king at like really, Lit RPG I think is the hardest magic system, like in terms of like hard and soft magic, it is one of the hardest. And that's one of the things that I loved about Dakota is there's no hand waving. Like he shows his work in excruciating detail, and I think that it was difficult for me because I fall a little bit more toward the gamelet side, which I think is like medium ground where there's a little bit of hand waving. Dakota doesn't have any of that, but I think that it helps you to understand exactly how the mechanics come together and how it shapes and form the world. And one of the things that he always said when we started co-writing together was the system trumps the story. If the story doesn't make sense inside the context of the system of levels that I built, then it's the wrong story.
Dies.
Yeah, the character dies. And I always thought that was a crazy but awesome way to approach story writing.
So many Excel sheets.
Excel is
So
the
we all
devil.
know each other pretty well.
Excel is the devil. I can do anything, almost anything with Excel. So I understand this.
Give me that pivot table. Let's do it.
That's right.
Now, real quick, do you all know what I mean when I talk about RPG juice? Or do I have to define it?
I don't. You'll have to.
Okay. So,
Sounds delicious.
I mean, don't
know what it
flavor.
is. Read the description.
it comes in a variety of flavors because so everyone understands crunch is mechanics. The field the mechanics support in the achievement of action becomes the juice. So there are
Oh my God, say that one more time. I'm so sorry. I'm still breaking down the first sentence and a half. One more
So,
time.
crunch is mechanics.
Okay.
The field the mechanics support becomes the juice. So if you were playing with giant robots, for instance, you need the mechanics to support the feel of you piloting a giant robot or whatever. So how do you balance the crunch versus the juice?
She's got it down this time.
I might have rigged this.
We're being as equitable as possible.
You got to say a name with that, because otherwise I'm going to give you that same look. Oh, it's not me. Crap.
Okay, let it go. It's the crunch.
So how do we balance that, right? So give a good grounding for it. If it makes sense that they can do it, then it makes sense that they can do it. So my characters have these really long montages, essentially, like really long training periods, like times where they have to like actually go through and they talk about what they're doing for training and stuff like that.
One moment, please. Can you please sort of throttle the mic? because you were
That mic holder right here.
Oh my God.
Yes, that is so much better.
Okay, sorry. I have a really nice microphone set up at home, and I do a lot of voice to text, so I'm used to clear enunciation at a really low level. So
That's fine.
All right,
That's why I'm like,
That's a dreamy voice that he uses on me.
So, basically, if you need something for later on in the story, you don't just insert it at the start of the book, right? You don't just say, hey, I need this as the Chekhov's gun in this story later on, right? I need this loop to close later. You put that stuff in, and then you train them up, and you fail. And you fail, and you fail, and you fail. And in book 2 or book 3, that Chekhov's gun really pays off well, right? If you use it in the same book, right? So you need to find new and creative ways to use what you're doing, right? So you can train all day, let's say fireball. Everyone knows what a fireball is. Real easy, right? You can train all day in a fireball. And then, of course, what's going to happen is at the end of the book, you're going to go up against something the fire is going to do, right? Every time. And they're like, well, crap, all I know is fireball, but I've trained it 10,000 hours, just one thing. What can I do that is fireball but not fireball to win?
So that's story progression issues. I guess that sort of counts, but
I guess I don't know what you're getting at then.
so what I'm talking about is the mechanic. So everything, as he said, the system supports the setting. The setting they have to marry together.
Mm-hmm.
And the juice is the concept of when you have something, making sure that the mechanics and the setting meld.
Okay. So that all happens before the book is ever written.
Yes, but I'm asking how do you, because you can go so crunchy that you destroy the juice.
Sure. Okay. So
How do you balance it?
gotcha.
And I'm getting a look like I'm crazy.
No. So I kind of get more now what you're talking about. So for me, that is all set up before the book is ever written. I do what I call system first world building. And so the system is set up in such a way that everyone plays by the same rules, but usually the main character either lucks into it or finds a better way of using those rules because the rules is written, right? And so the system always comes first. And from there, then I make a story idea, and then a setting, and then an outline. And so when we do that, when we're balancing the juice, like, I'm not sure if you're saying in the book where, like, how much numbers do we put, like, how much, like, pages, or, like, what?
So I'm not talking about necessarily the numbers in the book.
Sure.
I'm talking about if I want to do a book about, like, demigod kung fu fighters,
Okay.
that their actions, their mechanics feel like demigod kung fu fighters.
Okay.
Does that work? Make sense?
And then what about those?
Do you have a lit RPG example that
Yeah.
you could base this off of?
I don't have a lit RPG example, but I have an RPG example. So have any of you heard of Exalted by World of Darkness? Someone here has.
Xander, what's the answer to this question, Xander?
The answer is that, sorry, I can't talk because I was cheering for Green Knight.
Green Knight?
Red Knight.
Red and yellow.
Light is always winning.
The answer is that it's all in how you prepare it. It's all in, like as Dakota was saying, it's all in how you do the outline, how you...
Dakota was actually, after I explained it better, on point because with how he does it, because it's system, then everything else.
Right.
Can I try to take a crack at it? I'm gonna try.
I want you all to try and take a
So I'm
crack.
jumping the line. So I think that the question in my mind, and maybe I'm misreading, is how do you balance the story with the game? And how does the game not overwhelm the story? And how does the story make sense in terms of the game?
That is not the question.
Okay, I totally misunderstood the question. I still don't quite get it. I'm trying my best, man. I'm trying.
Yeah.
Juice is actually the fantasy you're trying to sell. The example is that I use is Lancer, where they're trying to sell you this big mecha RPG
Okay.
with customizable robots, and it's very crunch light.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been the top-selling game on Untitled for a few years because, as Abaddon puts it, by the way, table 212 in the artist alley, is that he's the only one who's selling this cool mecha thing, which has cool artwork and so forth. And
Yeah.
so the juice is just, it's that feeling. It's that feeling, the fantasy that you get at the end of the day from playing the game.
Okay, so then basically it is
The
how
dopamine
do you build mechanics to represent the story you want it to be?
Well,
How do you build the mechanics to represent the game you want?
You build the game first.
It's the power fan.
We all build
It's the power fantasy. It's not,
Yeah.
take a step back. It's not
So-
the story. It's
Yeah.
about building that overall feel. Like, how do you sell that it's a fantasy game or that it's a
Horror game or
a kung fu game?
you all code. A lot of you mentioned playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure.
Dungeons and Dragons is an empowerment fantasy.
Yeah.
You mentioned playing WoW. WoW is selling you on being an orc versus an elf or a human, and therefore you want the orcs to be shamanistic, therefore you make mechanics for them to be shamanistic.
Yeah, and that's really just story feel. That's like, okay, like most of the mechanics you can actually use in many different ways. One of the best examples I ever heard from a video game developer, he's like, what's the difference between a horse and a tiger? And I was like one's a horse, you ride it, and one's a tiger, and it'll come and kill you. And he's like, no, there's no difference. One has a slashing attack, the other has a slashing attack. One has a biting attack, the other one has a biting attack.
Oh, no, it's totally the wrapper.
Yeah, and so then the mechanics underneath are essentially the same. Like there's some stuff from different series, I'm like, oh, I'm going to use similar mechanics from other areas. Like, I don't know, like Amarillo was really a lot of Oblivion and Skyrim. I was like, oh, that's a really cool part of it. And then you get the systems because they not only go into the crunchy mechanics of it, but they have the effacing of, okay, this feels like I'm doing alchemy. This feels like it's touching that barrier. I'm gonna, find 7,000 nerd roots, which please don't do that. Go find nerd roots everywhere and go make potions and stuff. And then you're like, okay, like this actually feels like it's fantasy alchemy, right? And then you can go, okay, how do I get that into my book? How do I use those kinds of similar systems to emulate that and make it smooth?
How do you get a new hand that touches the beacon? A new hand that touches the beacon.
No, you bet. Don't you make me start on that. I was stuck as a vampire in that game for so long. But it really, when you're making a system can become anything. So you can have a smithing system, and then underneath that the mechanics of that actually work the exact same as a food cooking system, which can be really cool. But it is all about, the presentation of it. How do you do it? How do you get the characters involved in it? Most of the time, it's the characters that are actually building it and making the juice, because it's how they are their relationship with it and how they build it out. Because you make the system, but it's all on the characters to kind of understand it, develop it into how is this going to affect the world? How is this something in their day-to-day lives, right? And then you go, okay, this is pretty cool.
I think maybe I understand. I think that for me, oftentimes the underlying system is exactly the same in a lot of my books because it's just math, right? You want a system that's balanced. You want skills that feel proportionate, that do the things that you want to do, and then you just reskin it, right? Like if I want something to feel shamanistic, I will take the underlying math that I already know works because I spent a lot of time building out this sort of mathematical system of how these types of skills will work. And then I'll reskin it and I'll give it a shamanistic feel. I'll give it some extra flavor text. I'll let it do something. So instead of, summoning, a swarm of little meteors that do damage, instead it's a swarm of locusts that do damage, right? So you change the skin while still keeping sort of the fundamental application that underpins the system that you built out. And that's how I approach it, I think. Again, that may not in any way answer the question. I'm still... It's super it's like I've had 5 beers. It is what it feels like. I'm working through it though.
That's why I'm an RPGer. I've moderated this panel because I ask RPG questions.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah. Prove your heritage, guys.
Well, yeah, because we all come from, I guess, different RPG backgrounds, right? Because some of us have been playing tabletops, which are more, they're kind of played out for you, right? And some are like D&D, where either, you're in a manual or you're not in a manual. Video games are a lot more railroaded nowadays, where you're like, sometimes, Hades, where you're actually following the railroad, right? You're going to take the story with you. So, yeah, no, I think, when you have RPG within the genre of lit RPG, it's actually more talking about how the character is progressing by playing through this game system, right? Than it is, you can take the systems and you can build it and use it as you want to. Like, I know that myself and a few other authors have actually made the system so it's a manual so you can use to make your own RPGs. But we don't usually actually utilize other RPG systems. We make our own.
Yeah.
So it means that we diverge from RPGs just because of that simple fact. And plus because we can't be too crunchy. Like, if we're too crunchy, then we get into the stats more than we get into the story. And then you get like lists and lists of pages. I'm sorry everyone, there's so many pages of stats. There's lists and lists of pages of stats where you're just going, okay, I've got it, but like, can we get back to the story part, right? And that's a huge blend, which can also change with like audiobook and written work, right? Written, you can do a lot more stats. Where in audio, you're like, I kind of want to hear a snippet instead of like all of these stat sheets. I feel sorry, Neil, because I know I've made him have to do that so many times. But then every time you make a new series, you make a new RPG, essentially. Right?
I truly think like it's really, if you're talking about like from a, how are you marketing your game, so to speak, and the juice that you're going to get, it's the fact that you go out, what if monsters are spawning in your backyard tomorrow, and you have to pick up a kitchen knife and kill something and suddenly you're leveling, right? And that is the post-apocalyptic genre and lit RPG, right? And so that is the juice of that fantasy fulfillment, where you get to go and play this video game right alongside these characters that are discovering the systems that have never been described to you because they existed on Earth, billions of years ago. So that, to me, is that answer to that question, if I understood it correctly.
Okay.
I'm unlike these guys up here. I'm more story-driven than I am system-driven, and I'm proud of that because I actually, when I wrote Feedback Loop, I was living in Mongolia, teaching English at a Coca-Cola factory, and I was reading a book by, I was reading Ready Player One and watching an anime, Sword Art Online, and reading Harmon Cooper. And I was, in 1 month, I was like, yeah, I think I just combine all this. This is before we had these terms, right? And so it was a story that I wanted to tell. And that's to my own detriment because they do better than me on lit RPG. I do well in cultivation, progression, fantasy, but they do better than me on lit RPG because there's are more game, the actual system is built really, really well. And I totally admit that. My situation is just like, I came into this, starting writing in 2007 for literary fiction, and I like writing a story. So it gives me more enjoyment, like making it part of the story and making it, that's more of my juice, as you would call it. So for Cowboy Necromancer, for example, I really like the Southwest, from Texas originally, Austin. And I was like, well, how cool, I took a trip to Santa Fe during Hurricane Harvey because we had to evacuate. And I was like, this would be the best setting. This New Mexico would be the best setting for a post-apocalyptic thing. One day I'll do it. And I told Luke Chimolenko, who some of y'all know, I should write a book called Cowboy Necromancer. And he was like, lol, yeah, do it. And then 2 years later I did it. So it's kind of,
for the memes.
Yeah, so this one might be for the memes. But to do that, and where the juice comes from, I read about 15 books on Southwest history, and I like everything from travel logs to like park rangers' biographies and things like that to try to pick up the terminology and make it realer. So that's kind of where I draw that from. And so it's different than these guys, and I like have so much respect for the amount of system work that these guys put in. I am very left-handed and very right-brained, so it doesn't really, numbers are very bad for me. I'm like 2 + 2 has to be 5. And so I hope that answers that question.
But I think that, just to expand on that a little bit, because I think that that's part of the draw of cultivation. I feel like progression fantasy is definitely, like if there was a pendulum that's swinging a little bit back toward the middle, away from maybe really, really crunchy lit RPG and more toward the game lit and cultivation side of things. And because I think people do enjoy story-driven narratives that are underpinned by a hard game magic system or progression system, but where the focus is, the characters and the character arcs and the story mechanics as much as the game mechanics. And so I think it's on a spectrum. So I don't think that you did anything wrong. I think that you're on a different place in the spectrum than Dakota is. Dakota, for me, is on the very far end of one spectrum, and then you have in a good way.
I totally agree with you, and I will tell you, I think that you possibly have the best understanding of the concept of juice, because I would say that you start juice and then work on your system. You say, here's how I want it to feel, and then you work backwards.
I am the juice king.
So, last question before I turn it over to the audience. When you have an exploit or a munchkin in your setting, what comes first, the exploit or the mechanics?
So again, for me, and I guess we'll start here since we started with Portland.
I have no clue where we started.
This is it, man. We're just rolling with it. We're all in. I think for me, and again, I think that although I design a system for my thing, I fall a little bit more on the Harmon side of things, where really it's about a story that I want to tell, and then I try to figure out what's the best system that's going to showcase that story that I want to tell. And one of the very common tropes in lit RPG game and cultivation is someone getting a class that sucks, or getting something that everyone else thinks is shitty, and then finding a way to use it in new and interesting ways to beat everybody. And I think that for a lot of reasons that's a very popular trope. And so it's something that I will include frequently, and it's definitely that comes first. That comes before the system, because usually that exploit is going to be kind of the core that I'm going to build this character around. That's the thing that they're going to exceed at and specialize in. And so I need to figure out how this is the story that I want to tell. This is the kind of character that I want to have. This is the kind of power that I wanted him to use and exploit. And now what kind of system would accommodate that flaw? What kind of system could I build that would accommodate this one little thing that he could take and blow wildly out of proportion to his advantage and everyone else's detriment? So that's usually kind of the progression of how I build that out.
So usually when I start making a system, I'm just like, this would be kind of cool. Like, I have this world, and I'm like, I really want to have an experience here. I want to have this character go do cool things. Usually I've got a scene in mind where I'm like, that would be super badass. But how do I get there? I've got to go back to the beginning and build them to get to that point, which is really fun. The problem is that as I start, like, I build the system, and the system's pretty much, concrete as soon as we start. If you're in a system long enough, you start to learn all of, like, oh, I could do this, couldn't I? Or maybe just this little bit over here. And so I just break my own system. And I'm totally fine with it, which leads to some hilarious moments, like breaking planets and stuff, which is totally accidental, but, it just happens. But, you have this stuff where it's like, okay, this mechanic works, and if I just evolve it this much, well, actually, there's a little bit of wiggle room here, and then you just find all the wiggle room, you love it. Like, every exploit you find in a game, and you're like, I'm going to go use the heck out of this, and this is going to be so much fun. But, yeah, I actually just get it most of the time by breaking stuff.
So a real quick example. So Em, can you raise your hand? Are you in the audience? So Em wrote in the VGO Expanded Universe, and she's a fantastic writer, and she also drove me nuts because I had built the system for VGO with Jack in mind, and then I built all of these rules that were there and they were important, but they were also kind of extraneous because they didn't really touch on my main character. And then when Em came in and started working on a new character, a very new setting, she's like, well, you built all of these things, and then she broke my system to shit. And she was like, chuckle and laugh and send me little prompts about all of these clever little things that she did, which absolutely worked with the system that I had built, and I had not really thought through those things, because again, they were kind of tangential to my storyline. So I was like, yeah, that exists, but I'm not really going to explore that, so it's fine if I leave it open-ended. And it was really interesting to watch her go in and just fucking throw monkey wrenches, just like shove them right into the machinery that I had built. And I was like, damn it, why are you doing this to me? But also, that's super interesting. So I think you can approach it both ways, and it can end up being really cool.
You totally can. That's why I had to have the question down, because I wanted to pick people's brains about how they approached it.
So for me, I actually go under the impression that the reader is going to be smarter than me. And so I haven't used exploits in my own system yet, because I'm really worried that if I have them in there, someone's going to read that book and go, he could break this, he could do that. And so I've tried very hard to shore up things like that for that reason and use more of a fantasy setting where, you know, you gain power, you strengthen yourself, and you get to the end goal of the book, right? So I think it's kind of interesting because I go off of the thing that, you know, most exploits I wasn't discovering in World of Warcraft or a video game. I would read about them on a forum somewhere, right? And then you try them out and it was a lot of fun. And then they get patched. And mine isn't a strict video game setting, like I'm not inside of a video game, it's real world. So this system had been used for billions of years, and if those exploits were there, they would have been patched a long time ago. I don't have the ability to patch my system. So I tried very hard to not use any exploits other than, you know, some stronger armor, so he might have a stronger class and train harder, but those are things that exist within the game.
I continue to my own detriment, remain really character driven, so I will build these things for my characters, and then as I'm writing, they break them themselves, or they just don't follow them. So for Cowboy Necromancer, the main character is, he's actually a pepper farmer, he's not a cowboy. People call him this, he doesn't like it. But he's a pepper farmer, and he's a necromancer because of the system that was put in place, but he's not a good necromancer because he doesn't really care for his power. He literally wants to live in truth or consequences and be left alone. And so a lot of the time when he's encountering things or there's something that happened, there's always like some necrotic thing that he could do that would help him, and I would get emails like, why doesn't he have like a bunch of dead bodies in his inventory list and stuff, and he could just summon them or whatever. He just really doesn't. Like, I've tried to make him smarter. He really just wants to like smoke cigarettes, grow peppers, and just survive the post-apocalyptic landscape that he's in. And then with this book, Quantum, Hughes kind of, he breaks the rules anyway, and he doesn't really believe in the rules, and he's also trapped on a Groundhog Day situation where it's the same day over and over again, and he uses his inventory list to keep track of how many days he's been stuck. And so he just tries to make the days as crazy as possible. Like, if you think of Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, like when he goes crazy with like the groundhog driving the car, that's what like him being stuck is. He's just like, all right, I have this huge inventory list, how many crazy things can I do? I don't care about the system, I just want to see if I wake up tomorrow somewhere else, right? And so again, the exploits I would love to put them in and have them like be something that can be patched or something, but my characters would probably break them for me, so, fortunate.
So, again, I'm going to call back to Sanderson's Laws of Magic one more time here. And so, the second law of magic, right, is limitations are better than power, at least in making cool and interesting characters. So, typically when I have a character who gains a lot of power in a really short amount of time, there's a serious detriment. That, like, if they get a boon, they get a serious bane as well, right? And if there's no, essentially, economy in your magic system, right? If there's no way to go beyond what, you know, the limitations of the character are supposed to be, it makes for very predictable storytelling. And sometimes it can be predictable that, like, they're just gonna, you know, hand their stuff away, but I'm trying to think of an example in my book where I've given my character a huge boost in power without also giving them a serious, like, obstruction. So, for instance, in this book, which is Something, right? So we have Full Murder Hobo, right? So that's the name of the series. It's Full Murder Hobo, and the Murder Hobo gets a lot more power than his friends, the other main characters in the story. But he is also batshit crazy, and because, you know, he was left alone to kill goats for 40 years, and they were trying really hard to kill him back. So, you know, he got a lot of power really quickly doing that when he came back to the real world. And I can think of examples, handfuls of examples, just throughout my books. Every time there's been a major jump in power, there's also been a serious detriment that actually affects the character. It can't be something like, oh, wow, I need to get this item and it costs 100 gold. 10 days have passed and I spent each day gathering this much gold. You know, like, it can't do that. It has to mean something to the story, or else that in itself is a useless arc, right? So I would say when it comes to exploits, they're kind of built in, but in a way that makes a story better, right? So if you're going to break the rules, the rules that are not like hard rules, like if you have hard rules, don't break those, because it makes it so hard if you're trying to expand out universes, if you're trying to write a follow-up series, if you're trying to do things like that. But when it's more like pirate rules, where it's more of a guideline, You know, you can definitely get away with that, but also make it cost them something that really matters.
Okay, and now we're going to go to audience questions. You're the first one I saw.
Michael said something that I think would be kind of difficult for me to get into this. How do you budget your time? How do you not like get really into potions and end up with 800 pages of material on potions and realize you've got about 4 pages on the combat system? Like how do you budget your time between writing, authoring, editing, going down the rat holes you love and enjoying this, and coming up with these fine books?
Crap. I love research. That's the problem. What I do is I say, okay, actually most of us have a very similar system.
Pause real quick. He does. He writes 300,000 word books, man.
So many ingredients. Actually, ingredient lists are a huge pain in the butt because there's so much information. So instead of making the ingredient list, as you go, discover the ingredients, which makes it a lot easier. But what I'd say for managing time is just chunk time. And then most of us do word sprints. So we do like 50 minutes on, like 10 minutes off. Not a minute off, that's Yeah, it's like Pomodoro technique. But what you do is you say, I'm going to go write today. And you do the writing. And then if you have questions about stuff, like on Patreon, I have all my rough drafts. And what that is like people will see a status screen and they're like, that's wrong. And I'm like, I know it's wrong. But what I've done is I've written down a note somewhere being like, well, this has changed, this has changed, this has changed. I just have it on a pad of paper, put that off to the side so that I can keep on writing. So I don't get distracted by those things. And then when I come back to it, I'm like, okay, well, now is technically my time off. So I'm going to go research all these things, make sure that I roughly think it works like this, but I'm going to go check this and make sure that it actually totally works like this. And then I can work it back in on the second pass and go, okay, now it's clean, it's good to go, and I can keep running.
Do you know when you spend too much time on shields?
Yes, but usually because it's dark outside.
So I will say that especially with new authors, they have something called terminal world building disease, where they just build and build and build. And I think the reason why is because world building is in a lot of ways easier than writing a book, because no one's going to see the world building. There's no judgment. It's just you building stuff. It's pure creativity. There is some degree of judgment in writing. When you're actually writing a story, you're intending that someone's going to read it eventually. And so a lot of writers are afraid to write their story, and so then instead they'll say, well, I'm being productive because I'm building out the shields and I'm building out the alchemy, and they're really just not writing because they're kind of scared that once you write, that's where the hard work is. You're going to have to do character stuff. You're going to have to do editing. There's no editing in world building. You just make whatever you want. It's awesome. It's pure creativity. So I think that you have to put a check on that if you want to do this as anything more than a hobby. You have to realize you have to write the story. So usually when I'm world building, I'll start when I'm doing a new series. I'll spend a week. I'll do a world building doc, and really what I'm looking at is what do I need, not to tell the entire history of the world. What do I need to tell this one story? And that's it. That's all I'm fleshing out. I'm only going to flesh out as much information as I need to tell this story right now that I have. And when I get to book 2, and I'm telling a different part of the story, I will flesh out the world to tell that part of the story. And so that way I'm never really cementing myself in at the beginning because I have, 500 pages of world building documents that I have to reference. My world building guideline is like 10 pages long, and then I do my outline, and then I write my book based on my outline. And as I'm writing it, sometimes I go back and I edit my world. I say, no, that doesn't really work. I need to change that. And that's how I move through it, because I never want to get stuck in that spiral of just, I really, for this to feel authentic, I really need 10,000 years of family histories and genealogies. No, you don't. You don't need that. Nobody needs that. So just do enough to tell the story you need to do, and then spend time writing the story, because that really is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, like, we take notes from almost each other all the time. Like, he gave me his note on the whole, what he just said earlier, but I would say second draft. That's what the second draft is for. Like, you just wrote this whole thing, you wrote a chapter that was 5,000 words, and you're reading through and you're like, wow, I really dove into shields from this chapter because I wanted to show off my system. And you delete a whole bunch. Like, I delete usually about 15,000 words on second draft, and then I tell my dev editor, rip it apart. Like, tell me where I went too far. So you're going to start seeing where it lags down, where you've gone into something too deep, and that's my sort of attitude to what they've said.
I'm gonna leave that in there. I'm gonna add more around it.
Do a little world building, if you will.
Yeah, you thought you had too many shields the first go around. You're getting more shields. No, so I like to do additive editing. I like my books to be bigger after editing instead of smaller. And I'm serious too. And I'll make it better. I'll make it flow better. I'll make it smooth, and I'll make it work all together. But for multiple reasons. One, I enjoy writing, so I want to write more, and I like my readers, so I want them to have more to read. So I'm going to make sure they have whatever I've written, because hopefully they like it. Also, it certainly doesn't hurt to have like 130,000 words is about a 13-hour audiobook, right? And I don't know about you guys, but if I see an audiobook at 10 hours or less, I'm like, hey, I'm weighing my decisions here. Like, am I going to spend money on it, or am I going to get the audio, right? Yeah, so I think that definitely our genre is tending toward much larger, windy books because of that. But it's kind of cool too to have all of the lore right there in the book. Sometimes, like, as much as you can get, like, if it's pertinent to the story, especially, like, it can be very cool to do that. So don't shy away from it. Like, don't throw out hundreds of thousands of words just because you're concerned. If your fans like it, or if you have other people that are reading it and they like it, believe them. They're gonna tell you what they want. So if they say, I really like this, awesome, just believe them. If they say, I don't really like this, wait for a second opinion.
What I'll add to that, and something that so what he does on a system, I do on world building. So the series that I'm starting this fall, I've been building this world since about 2018. And my recommendation is, so I'm going to publish my 75th book this year. Right now I think I'm on 70 or 71. And but I kind of trained myself to do this. I started in I first self-published in 2011. And my first book I did NaNoWriMo. So and then I started a publisher in Asia where they were like, well, you can write, so you write all of the books. So I was writing 6 to 12 short stories every 2 weeks. And so I moved this fast, not because I have ghosts, because I don't do ghosts, it's because I literally just move as fast, and I don't have kids or pets. I just have a beautiful life. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is I will start, when I was writing this book, I was world building this part-time. Kind of like if I was reading Norse history, Roman history, and I always liked reading Japanese mythology. And so I would be taking notes from that, and I would build things out that way. Meaning that I have so much details that aren't actually in the book, what Ryan was mentioning about deleting a lot. But I have been building it for years at this point. So I use Evernote, and I just have massive documents, because I'm going to do mini series in this, because if you guys know anything about my writing, you know that I did a bunch of lit RPGs like this one in the Proxima Galaxy. And I didn't do that for the Proxima Galaxy. I just kind of winged it. And then I don't remember anything, right? Because I write too much, and I'm like, okay, so this time I'm going to do it the other way. I'm going to actually build it all first, as they would do a system, and then have it available so I can reference it later. I don't need to know King Otonashi was doing this, but I do know, right? And so it comes into the Hemingway thing of knowing, being able to delete everything, but it still has the feel of authenticity by being it's been written, but it's just been deleted. If that makes sense. So that's my recommendation, especially if you're doing it on that front. Is build all your shields. You don't need them all, and but you have them, and they do exist in your world. And when you need them, they're already readily available, and you don't have to struggle when you're doing your second or third edit to add details, because you already have them, and you can put them in there, and they already flow perfectly. So there's not the reference of shit, did I do that in the beginning, or did I do this? You already know the history of it. So that would be my recommendation.
So I just got the 10-minute warning. Next question is you, and then we'll try and go with you back there afterwards.
I was just curious how you feel about letting your characters influence the mechanics or the system itself in the book. And then
He's no, I'm maybe.
And then I also just wanted to give you an opportunity to lift up any female or minority lit RPG authors you think we should be checking out.
Katie Hanna, Jay Bush right here.
Jay's right here in the blue hair.
Yeah. Emily right there.
Yeah, and she's got, you can pick her books up. Shadow Press has a giant, awesome spread of amazing lit RPG books and game lit and cultivation books. 2820, America's Mark. Em's there. She's got 3 awesome books. She's doing signings. Come buy them. Also, J.D. Asher is another one of our awesome authors who does not. She writes amazing books. Her newest book, Deathless Dungeoneers, is easily the best thing she's ever written. It's not Dungeon Core. It's like Dungeon Tycoon, and it is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
So go check those out. J.D. Asher, Emily right here. E.C. Godhand is her pen name. Check them out as well. Obviously, Jay is amazing. So yeah, those are my recommendations.
I think one of the ones that's here would be TJ Randall as well. He's, I think he's open about it now, right? He's recently transitioned, so that's also kind of like unique into that side of things. And then our big author arguably is a minority, right? Alan Kong, it would be another one, but he's also one of our biggest. Tao Long, of course, Tao Long, another one, and he does a lot of really good stories.
Don Chapman.
Oh yeah, Don Chapman.
Yeah, 100%, yeah. Also, I was going to say Don Chapman and KT Hanna, but I also, that's kind of prejudiced because I hang out with them all the time. But no, like, I think we have been very lucky with so many people in lit RPG from so many different backgrounds, which makes it so much more fun. I hope that we get more spotlight on different people, but it is a thing of, as we go through, I love how the new games and everything, it's an even playing field, which makes it a lot more fun of, like, you can do whatever, especially with self-publishing, where it's, okay, if you want to do something, you can put it up on KDP, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Because everyone has the opportunities there, which
You
is...
can write an email, you can publish your book.
Yeah.
But kind of back to the first question part of it was, how do we let our characters influence the system, right? So my whole idea is when I finish these really long series that I'm doing, I want to open those up to other talented authors and let them come in and even sometimes while it's still ongoing, let them write stories or spin-offs or whatever else. And if I give just this super obvious exploit, if I say, because I really, really want it, the power of friendship guides me, I can do this, that makes the system as a whole weaker, right? And so if I don't allow that sort of thing with my own characters, and then I absolutely don't allow it with someone else coming in and writing, it makes for, I think, a stronger story overall, because you have to be creative with the mechanics as they stand. And that's more fun anyway.
Dakota and I are really good friends, and the number of things that he shot down when I was pitching him stuff for Bibliomancer is legendary. He's like, no, that's not gonna work. If you do these 5 things, maybe you can get a similar effect, but like no give whatsoever. And I consider us good friends. So yeah, he's not joking. He's not joking. Yeah.
Did you say me and my spreadsheets are a married couple? Is that what you said?
No, he would say you are the married couple. If no one else has something to add to it, I'll move to the next question because I'm trying to get more in.
Yeah. So the genre as a whole is kind of tended toward the chonkers and mega chonkers in books, but we're also seeing a large movement toward episodic internet-based content. How do y'all feel about that? And,
Love it.
You know what? If the book is out there and you enjoy it, it's doing the right thing. That's it.
So the cool thing about what we do is that other authors are not our competition. Netflix is our competition. Xbox. So like 1 in 4 readers in America read a book a year. And so there's what we are looking for is people that read all the time, right? That's the people that are in our genre. Like they're called the actual term for it is called a whale reader, because they come in and they just devour everything as they go and leave no krill for the others.
Or books.
Right. And so
you can eat all my books.
Very nutritious. Right. So what we need as authors is a lot of series that are long books to keep them engaged in our genre. I think at last estimate, the actual entirety of the genre and like the American that read our books is approximately 30,000 total people, and we are one of the I mean, look around, man. Like we did the same panel before, and it was like 5 people that showed up at all, right? So it's growing really fast and it's growing really awesome. But wherever people are getting their content, man, however they're getting it, I love it because it means more readers and it means getting them introduced to the genre, and they're gonna want more.
I think it also shows that a lot of the hard and fast rules that we used to have about what constitutes good writing, what constitutes a good book, I think we see that that's not the case anymore, right? If you went back 20 years, they were very, very strict, like, you have beginnings, you have middles, you have ends. This is the way a book works. These are the things you can do, these are the things you can't do. And I think now, with the diversity of platforms, it's really showing that readers have a lot more diversity in their tastes than maybe agents and editors in years past gave them credit for. And we're realizing that the 3-act structure is one way to write a book, but so is this episodic slice of life where it's, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, but it's not necessarily the structure that we see in most traditional novels. And so I think it's exciting for us as writers because it means that there's so many more ways for us to tell stories, and there's so many different avenues for us to post those stories and find readers. I constantly tell writers at every conference I go to, there's never been a better time to be a writer because there are so many things that you can explore. And if something doesn't work, you just try again. It doesn't matter. There's no stigma if you put something out and it fails. Who cares? You go and you try again on a different platform, doing a different thing with a different story. And as long as you're continuing to tell stories, take shots on goal, I think that you'll probably find success.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to remind everyone, please rate this in the act, and we're going to go into shameless plug, what they have coming up. And can we make it cool? We'll need to make it quick. We only have 3 minutes. So let's start with Dakota and work our way over.
So what do I have coming up?
What do you have coming up? What do you want to tell them to buy?
Okay, cool. So if you want something awesome to read, get something. And definitely go out there and read anything by Dakota Krout, which is book 2 in this series. And everything will be out a little bit later, a little bit later this year. Other than that, I do have something like 36 total books out right now that are mine. Obviously, I have a publishing house as well, so all of my authors, were handpicked by me, and they're all amazing and wonderful authors, so go and check them out, which is mountaindalepress.com is great. Now, what I have coming out this year is I had the book 7 in the Completionist Chronicles come out at the start of August, and that's what I consider my current main series, which I think is, for me, how I see right in the center of the genre, as well as I can. And so I had that one come out at the start of August. I have the next book coming out in about a month or so. So I'm getting these books out fast, and I have a new series coming out every once in a while. But yeah, so keep on it. I'm going to keep putting out books and keep you guys entertained as long as I can.
So hey everyone, I'm Harmon Cooper. I have so much swag up here, so please just come get it all. A couple of things. I have made it easy for you to just scan and see what I have. Again, I'm at, I think, 71 books right now, so I have 4 to publish this year. I'm publishing a Cowboy Necromancer novella from my Progression Fantasy series. Pilgrim 7, I'm publishing War Priest 4, and then I'm starting The World According to Dragons, which is the one I was talking about that I've been building for a while. So come get one of these as well, because I just put the pre-order up. Other than that, you can go to harmoncooper.com, and I have everything up here. And as I said, I have some books to give away too, so I have 2 copies of Tokens of Towers. This one's been claimed already by Jay over here. This one I'll give away tomorrow at Podium's panel, because I'm on a panel here tomorrow with Podium. Jim Butcher's on the panel as well, and they produce the audiobook, so I want to give this away then, so come to that. So yeah, come meet me.
So Ryan DeBruyn is my name again, just to remind that, obviously. I just had Ether Labs 4 come out. I'm working on 5 right now. Star Tower Book 2 is in Dark Inspire. It's up for pre-order. It's post-apocalyptic cultivation with RPG. And I've got, I think that will be my 8th book when Dark Inspire comes out, and I'm one of the MPT authors. And just, I forgot somebody for your question for minority. I saw him, Ramon Magia over there, so I saw him and wanted to make sure I mentioned his name too.
Alright, so if you go check out Chatfield.com, it's going to get upgraded, so it's not so bad. So it's got everything on there. But recently I finished the 10 rounds, unfortunately, like sad time. But the e-books are all out. The audiobooks for the 9th round and the 10th round are still coming out, and they're going to be actually out. The 9th round will be out before the end of the year, and we will be done recording and releasing all of the other audiobooks. So from 2-week curse to the 9th round, we're going to have all the audiobooks, which is awesome. I'm working on the Builder's Legacy series right now. It's a science fiction lit RPG series. First book's out, and the second book is coming out, and it will have the audiobook out at the same time, which is going to be really fun. And I'm working on a super secret squirrel fantasy project, as it got termed by Daniel Schnopen last night. So look forward to that. That's going to be later next year, and that should be fun as well.
James Hunter, I got a new one out. It's the first book in a new series called Vigil's Justice. It's Monster Hunter International meets The Witcher. Lots of guns, lots of action, really cool. Good crunch for you lit RPG fans. It kind of reads like an urban fantasy. It's really great. The audiobook is currently out, narrated by Luke Daniels, who's amazing. Shadow Alley Press, you can find all of my books there. You can find all of our authors' books there. And we also have a booth, 2820. So much good stuff. We're doing giveaways every single day. So please come by, see some of your awesome lit RPG authors that are there. Pick up some awesome books too. Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you so much for coming.